Hello, welcome. Welcome to the OUM community and today's webinar, our financial information session for prospective students. So Talofa to Andrea and Christina and Consuela, Kiora to Elias and Heather and Isaac and Yvette, bonsoir to Leilani and Matthew. Michael and Nathaniel, Wanya to Pepper and Ripel Ben, and Shaneka and Agu and Veronica and Yash. And hello to those of you joining us via recording. I'm Dr. Nicolette McGuire Carter, and I'm Oceana University of Medicine's Associate Dean for Student Engagement. And I'm so pleased to be joined today by our Bursar and Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Susie Robertson, who will be speaking with us and giving us an overview of the tuition and fees for the Oceana University of Medicine Medical Doctor Program or MD program for 2026. This webinar is intended to give you information to support your financial decision making and planning as you consider medical school. Ms. Susie will give lots of caveats about the examples that are being provided, but we really try to be as transparent as possible because across all areas of our programming and for all of our students, we really are focused on supporting each and every student as individuals through our MD program. So that includes ensuring that you have the appropriate information on financials to ensure that you can make the best decision possible for you personally. So before we get started on our webinar today, I'm just going to ask Ms. Susie to introduce herself. You may have had a chance to meet her before if you've attended any of the other financial information session webinars, but I'll just ask Ms. Susie to introduce herself. And can you also tell us a little bit about how you came to join the OUM community, Ms. Susie?
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming and giving us your time today. It's very important to me that you are fully informed with your decisions. Now, before I start talking about the tuition and fees, which I spend a lot of my time doing, I am an accountant. I started my career in education. I spent 14 years teaching high school before I decided that was not for me. And I then retrained into law and accountancy. And I worked for the Australian Taxation Office for 20 years, auditing Australia's wealthiest individuals. And now in the last 3 years, I've moved to OUM, where I'm helping inspiring young individuals, which you are to a person, with the financial aspect of getting through the MD program and making it as transparent as we possibly can. Unfortunately, I can't give you a discount, but I can certainly tell you all the ways and things that you can do and help you and certainly encourage you to manage the financial aspect of the program.
Thank you, Miss Susie. And just wanted to say a talofa to Yash and Whitney and to Tan and Sinimbibe and to Rose and Louise and Kieran and Heather and Caroline and Ashish, and to all of those of you who are joining us via recording as well. So throughout the session, feel free if you have questions about the content that Ms. Susie is discussing, you can feel free to use the Q&A box to submit your questions. We will try to get to as many of those questions live as we possibly can. If you submit a question and we're going to get to that a bit later on in the webinar, we'll hold the question and answer it at that time point. So no worries if we don't get to your question right away. So I will now turn it over to you, Ms. Susie, to walk us through our 2026 tuition and fees overview for OUM. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Dr. Maguire. Okay, can we have a skip through to the session overview, please? Okay, so just to sort of give you a bit of context about what we're going to talk about today, what I've learned working in a university that has students in Australia and New Zealand and Samoa and Canada and America is we have very different words for the same thing. So we've had to work very hard to come up with what I call a universal OUM language. So when I say tuition, it means the same thing to everybody. And when I say fees, it means the same thing to everybody so that there is no confusion. It's an ongoing work in progress, but we always start with the language and what language we're going to use, and you should see it used consistently in the university when talking about tuition and fees. Okay, I am going to provide you with a program overview, which is a long way outside of my remit, but I think unless you understand what you're looking at and how the costs link into that, it becomes a disconnect, and it shouldn't be a disconnect. It has to be an integrated view. So we're going to have a look at the program. We're going to look at how the cost comes into that program. We are then going to look at all of the other costs that no one ever told you about. This is an ongoing issue for me. I have students telling me that I was never told about these things. You are, and we'll tell you again today, and it's certainly up to you to make yourself fully aware of those things. And then I will provide a brief overview about how you're able to pay tuition. Now, it will be brief because once you've gone through, completed your admission, once you've worked out that this is a program for you and that you have the financial means to complete it, you will complete your admissions, you'll have an interview. God willing, you'll be offered a place at the university. There will be another webinar, which will be a nuts and bolts how you pay your fees webinar. Okay, so a much more specific webinar, which will be very targeted to that action. At this point in time, I think you just need to know how much it's going to cost. And then any questions that we haven't answered as we go through, we'll answer at the end. Okay, next slide, please. All right. Now, this keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? Okay, the first one. I need another click, please, Dr. Maguire. Okay, you will hear me talk about SIS. You may have heard other people talk about SIS also. SIS stands for Student Information System. Now, ours is a bespoke OUM system built in-house. That is where all of your account data and all of your student academic data is held and is viewable. Okay, so your accounts are always viewable. And your student data, although I don't know a lot about student data, my understanding is it's completely viewable to you as well. Okay, so that's the first word of the day, SIS. No doubt I will use it again. Okay, tuition. Tuition is the cost charged to earn credit points that make up the MD program. Okay, so you must pay tuition to access the university. The way that we fund tuition or bill you for tuition in the university are tuition credits. Okay, so you must purchase tuition credits to apply. Essentially, you purchase credits and then you use them to get into access your unit. Okay, so credits is a word you will hear used a lot. When we're talking about tuition credits, we're talking about what you've paid. And the nuts and bolts of that will be for the next webinar. Now, the last piece on this slide. Oh, sorry. I've got my slide with all of the things on. Okay, so the tuition credit cost is both the tuition and your universal fees. Now, universal fees are exam proctor, clinical key, and any other fee that every student in the university has to pay. Okay, so they are fees that you have no choice in. They are required to pay to be paid. Now, universal fees are largely, almost entirely third-party expenses that we on charge to students. So we divide them out because we have a tuition, which is the cost of the university delivering the program to you, and the fees are actually the third-party costs of delivering the program to you, but we've bundled them all into a tuition credit. Okay, so tuition credit includes both of those things. Let's go to the next one. Right. On top of universal fees that you will not see because they're hidden, or they're not hidden, but they're included in the tuition credit cost, there are two additional types of fees. The first fee I call behavioural fees. They are fees that you do not have to pay if you make some smart choices. Okay, not everyone has these options available to them, but if you are very focused on how you're going to pay your fees, you can avoid these fees. Card payment fees, I'm sure you're aware, if you've got a credit card, you've seen credit card fees. Okay, so if you pay with a credit card, our payment gateway bills you the credit card cost. That's actually outside of our control, but it is an additional fee. If you lose your student ID card, which is essential once you get into clinical rotations, you will need to purchase an additional one. So don't lose your student ID card. Easy. Okay. The other fees are late payment fees. Now, there are two types of late payment fees. If you pay 3 days after the due date, a flat $25 late payment fee will go on your account. Once your account has been overdue for a month, there will be an interest payable that will be added onto the overdue balance at the end of each month. So as long as you keep on top of your fee and pay your account on time, you can avoid both of those. Now, there is another very large fee comparatively, which is clinical rotation hospital fees. Sorry. I've had RSV all week, and so there was touch and go if I was going to make it today, but I'm here, but I do have a terrible cough. Clinical rotation hospital fees are the fees that the hospitals charge us for taking you for a rotation. So this is very overt and very transparent. The only thing we are able to offer you with this is because if the hospital charges us, they charge us in Australia with GST. We do not have to charge you the GST. So for the Australian students, that gives you a 10% reduction on the total hospital fees. But hospital fees, generally speaking, are weekly. In the time I've been in the university, there was just a few entities were paying hospital fees. Now, we have moving towards over half of the Australian hospitals are charging hospital fees. Some of the New Zealand hospitals are, and every American hospital charges fees. So depending on where you're located, that will give you an indication of an additional cost, which you are not going to be paying until, what are you, 27, 26, so 27, till 2029. So I don't want to start talking to you about the cost of those hospital rotations because it's 2.5 years away before you would have to pay it. And so the market has changed so much in that time that it would be misleading for me to give you an estimated figure. But it's something for you to be very, very aware of. Okay, let's move on.
I think it's just important to note here that OUM is not the one charging those clinical rotation hospital fees. It's the hospital themselves that sets the fees and charges the students. But because you are paying your tuition through OUM, you pay your clinical rotation hospital fees to OUM, but we're not making any money. We're not taking a cut off of that. It's simply what the hospitals charge to take you on as a medical student in your clinical rotation. So those are fees that all medical students will pay that rotate at that hospital. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And Miss Susie, anything you want me to supplement here, just let me know.
Well, given that you're faculty, you might be better off to explain the two programs than me.
Oh, sure. I can do this one then. Let's give your voice a bit of a break. Okay, so we have two pathways for our MD students at OUM. So we have a standard pathway and a USMLE, or United States Medical Licensure Examination pathway. So the standard pathway is for students who are citizens and residents of Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Samoa. And for the standard pathway, those students take a preclinical phase, which includes a general principles class, 9 organ systems classes, and a preclinical exam. Then they have a transition phase, which it consists of 2 clinical transition units of 8 weeks each, including 1 in-person week of clinical skills. And then they move on to their clinical phase, which includes their clinical rotations and final clinical examinations. So that's the standard pathway. The USMLE pathway is very similar to the standard pathway in that it has a 2-year preclinical phase where you take a general principles class followed by 9 organ systems classes. And you take a clinical phase, which includes 72 weeks of clinical rotations. The difference between the standard pathway and the USMLE pathway is the transition phase. So in the standard pathway, you take 2 clinical transition units. In the USMLE pathway, you also take 2 clinical transition units, but this is the time where we provide you with preparation for your USMLE Step 1 exam, which is the first examination required for licensure in the United States. And it's also an examination that is required by most hospital systems to enter clinical rotations in the United States. So we have a USMLE prep program for Step 1 at this phase, and we also have a USMLE prep program for Step 2, which occurs during the clinical phase for students in the USMLE pathway, and there is no additional charge for students to take the USMLE prep programs. It just consists of additional time that is needed for you to prepare for those exams and take and pass them. So that's the main difference between the standard pathway and the USMLE pathway. The USMLE pathway, I should say, is for students who are citizens and residents in North America. That is for individuals who are in the United States and in Canada. And And I just see that there is oh, no, there's no open questions at the moment. So I'll move on to the next slide and I'll pass it back over to you, Ms. Susie.
Thank you. Okay, so just a couple of very common questions that we get often about tuition and fees. The tuition, so the underlying credit point cost is subject to an annual increase based on CPI. So in a couple of slides on, I'm going to show you the tuition credit costs in 2026. Okay. So you'll be in the university by the time that the 2027 tuition credit cost is announced. Okay, that is released on as near as possible as we can get to the 1st of September every year. And it will then be applied from any tuition credits purchased from 1 January. So as you can imagine, there is a fairly big incentive for students to purchase credits in December for the following year, because you can make a small saving based on however much the credit point cost has increased. Now, the underlying fees, which I talked about, which are incorporated into the tuition credit cost, we basically look at what they are, what our third-party vendors provide us every year, and we just review that against what we're charging, what we collected, have we met our costs, and then we update them every year as well. So vendors do not stick to CPI, and they tend to be a bit lumpy in how they price things. So sometimes they go up a lot, and other years they hardly go up at all. I have no control over that. It's interesting for budgeting, shall we say. Okay, now for yourself, you need a 5-year budget. You need to satisfy yourself that you can pay both your tuition and your living expenses every year until you graduate. Okay, now I can't emphasize this enough. There is nothing worse than looking or engaging with a student who can't continue because they don't have sufficient funds. Okay, so you really need to have a very clear understanding of what your financial needs are, what your financial obligations are, and how you're going to manage all of those things and pay your tuition and fees. You are not allowed to progress through the university unless you pay your fees as you go, at a minimum. Okay, I'll talk some more about budgeting because it is something I'm very passionate about, because I really want to know that when you come to us, you have a clear and sustainable financial plan. Okay, and sometimes that involves me working through with students and them going, actually, I can't afford this year. I'm happier for you to do that than to come into the university and then not be able to afford to pay. Okay, one of the very important aspects of your planning, you need to understand you will not have the capacity to work in your paid profession. Now, I know some of you have very well-paid professions that you are moving on from, and you're able to manage that through preclinical quite effectively. However, when you get to clinical rotations, the time commitment is so significant that you will not have capacity to work. Now, I have learnt this from talking to students sitting there OSCE. It's a consistent message, certainly with Australian students, that there's just no capacity during clinical rotations to work in a paid profession. Okay, there is one question. I can't see it. Oh, yes, I can. Look at that. You notice in my bio, I said nothing about IT. It's not my strong point. Okay, what loans do US students successfully use? We are not affiliated with any organisations that provide student loans. I do not know if American students are able to get loans. I am aware that there is an Australian provider. However, I would very much like to talk to you in detail before you go on board with that provider so you fully understand the commitment you're making. Um, so, okay, I'll leave that there. Unfortunately, my answer is what loan options do US students successfully use? My answer is I don't know. Um, I've noticed a question from Michael about the average fees. I will talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Okay, let's move on to the next slide.
Just wanted to say briefly, just to reiterate Ms. Susie's point about the 5-year budget for ensuring that you can pay your tuition and living expenses. Before we started doing these webinars, I would say that financial difficulties was the main reason why we had students leaving the program. We have a number of student support services in place that can help students through academic and environmental difficulties. And we also have services like this in our from our financial department to ensure that you have all the information that you need to make smart financial decisions for yourself. We do not want to see students entering our program that aren't confident that they can finish due to financial difficulties. It's a really difficult situation to put yourself in. So make sure that you are very thoughtful about your budgeting. And in addition to the bullet about not being able to work while you're undertaking clinical rotations, we also recommend that students who are starting their general principles, which is their first course in the preclinicals, that you pare down if you are working, that you pare down your work schedule as much as possible. And then as you continue through the preclinicals, that you add work hours. We do have students who will in the past would begin the program working full time, and it was just too overwhelming for them to have 40 to 50 hours of class and study in preclinicals and also be working full time. So that's something that we suggest as well. And we'll talk a little bit. We try to talk about that in each of our webinars. If you have questions about that, we have a webinar coming up next month with our student ambassadors, and we'll have them explain a little bit about what they did to ensure that they were able to pay for the program and their work schedules fit what their needs were during the preclinical phase and what they did during the clinical phase as well. All right, Ms. Susie, I'm moving on to the next slide.
Okie doke. You might be able to do this one as well.
Okay, here's a bit of an overview of our MD program. I would encourage you after you see this and after you've attended the webinar, if you have questions, to first go to our website. There's a lot of information that has some more specifics about our standard and our USMLE pathways. So choose the one that applies to you, and you can get some more information about that on the website. Also, if you haven't connected yet with Camille or Shanda, our admissions counselors, they're so nice and so knowledgeable. So if you have questions about the program and kind of specific details related to your situation, definitely get in touch with our admissions team as soon as you feel ready to do so. There's a form on the website that just indicates to them that you want to have them reach out. And you can always email them directly as well, admissions@oum.edu.ws. Okay, so we have 182 credits in our MD program. Ms. Susie was speaking a little bit about how tuition is how you purchase credit points. And then, so you'll be purchasing 182 credits as part of your credits towards graduation. So there in the preclinical program, there are 102 credits spread across our general principles course, are 9 body systems. So that includes things like the cardiovascular system, the pulmonary system, the urinary system, endocrine system, nervous system, musculoskeletal and tegumentary, heme immune, I already said pulmonary, I was going to say respiratory, reproductive system, gastrointestinal system, and I think have I mentioned 9? Something like that. Close enough. And then your 2 clinical transition units. So that's 102 credits that you purchased during the preclinical phase. Then for USMLE pathway students, their USMLE prep course occurs after their preclinical phase. There are no credits associated with USMLE prep. It's a course that you do not have to purchase additional credits for, and you don't have any credits to earn preparing for your USMLE, but you do have to take that standard licensure exam before you transition into the clinical phase of the program. Next are the clinical tuition credit points. So there are 72 credits associated with the clinical phase of the program, and those correspond to the 72 weeks of rotations that you take. So there are different numbers of weeks for your core rotations that include things like family medicine, psychiatry, the internal medicine, emergency medicine, so on and so forth. And then you have a set of 4 electives that can be areas of your interest. So, for example, if you're interested in anesthesiology, or if you're interested in endocrinology, or if you're interested in dermatology, those are the times that you would take those types of credits. During your clinical phase, all students at OUM take a 4-week rotation at our Tupua Temesese Mea Ole Hospital, or TTM Hospital, which is in Apia, Samoa, the beautiful islands that you see here. So students can take either a core rotation or an elective rotation in Samoa. The most popular rotations to take in Samoa right now are the psychiatry and the obs and gynae rotations, because you just get access to different types of care pathways and patients, and the amount of skills that you learn and the things that you're able to do in Samoa just greatly surpass the types of experiences that you will have on rotation in Australia or Aotearoa, New Zealand, or the United States or Canada. So this is usually a highlight of most of our students' degree. Is their Samoan clinical rotation at TTM Hospital. And in addition to these credit points, you have a couple of hurdle exams to take. There are no additional credit points associated with those hurdle exams or costs to purchase credits for those exams. There are costs associated with the exams that are smaller fee type costs that Ms. Susie will mention as we get to that part of the presentation.
You've got one more. You've got research still to come.
And research. So all students at OUM complete a research project, original research. All students have access to a research advisor at no additional cost. They all take an ethics and methods in research unit and complete their research project, and they're given 8 credits associated with their research, and they also will have a project that typically is published. Doesn't have to be published by the end of their degree, but this is really helpful when you are applying for residencies, and also it's an essential part of any MD program. Being able to understand research, how to apply it to practice, is part of what you'll learn in the research tuition credits that you'll purchase. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A about the MD program. So I'm just going to try to answer those quickly because I want to focus on financials specifically. I want Miss Susie to do that. But Elias is asking, does OUM have an academic calendar available? I was wondering what holidays the university honors and how the program is spaced out. Is each system, general principles, cardiology, pulmonary, taken consecutively, or are there breaks in between each system? Same with clinical rotations. Are they taken consecutively, or is there a break between each rotation? There is an academic calendar published for each year in advance of the year. We offer multiple classes at the same time, but you will be pre-registered into a specific set of classes just to help ease your degree and make sure that you finish as efficiently as possible. There is a 2-week break between each class. Classes run between 6 and 12 weeks. So there's 2 weeks of break between each system. There may be in the future changes to the length of blocks, but there will continue to be breaks in between each block. In terms of holidays, the university, because we operate across various jurisdictions, if there are holiday Mondays, for example, you'll see our staff in Australia, the office will not be open and they won't be available on that holiday Monday. But because we have staff that will be in Canada, like myself, where we don't have a holiday, there'll still be university faculty and staff available on an ad hoc basis. Do we arrange rotations for students in the US, or do students need to arrange rotations in the US by themselves? Our dean's office, we have a dean for North America and Australia. Our dean's office for that region is the one that arranges clinical rotations. We also allow for students to, in the United States and Canada, to identify sites for rotation that they are interested in and to work with the dean's office to set up those rotations. We do not do that in advance with individuals who are not yet part of the university community. We also don't do that early on the preclinical program. That'll start around the time of your clinical transition units. Is research required? Yes. All students must complete a research project during their degree. There are no exceptions to that, and there is no prior credits kind of granted. So, for example, if you've done a master's research project or a PhD level research project, you will still have to do the research in OUM's degree. Okay, Miss Susie, over to you, and I will answer some of those other questions in the chat box. I will move on to the next slide and let you go ahead.
Okie doke, thank you. Right, this is the clinical credit cost in 2026. Okay, so that is both the tuition and the universal fees bundled together, and remembering that you've got 102 preclinical credits, 8 research credits, and 72 clinical credits. So you're all smart people. You can do the sums and work out your total cost in 2026. Remembering that does not include hospital fees, and it doesn't include the annual uplift beyond 2026. So just to revisit the things that are in that tuition credit cost is the exam proctor, which is your online exam tool, the clinical key, which is an extensive online library, the CTU in-person workshop, so the cost of that workshop, the NBME exam, step 1 and step 2, 1 attempt at your final OSCE exam, and in Australia, an AMC preparation program post graduation. Now, you need to be aware that you are not charged for your OSCE and your AMC prep program until you start purchasing clinical credits. Okay, so we don't start billing you for those things that are a long way down the road until you get to clinical credits. What I would say to you is statistically, if you get through preclinical and you get through all of those 102 credit points, statistically, your chances of graduating are very good. Okay, so if you do that hard work early and you get through that, statistically, your chances of finishing your MD program are very good. Okay. Next slide. I'm watching the time a little bit. Okay, this is going to answer a question that someone's asked. Okay, how do you pay for your tuition? Okay, so there are three options. Well, there's one extreme to the other, and then there's monthly. So if you want to lock in the 2026 cost and you have the means, you can purchase your tuition credits for the whole program in 2026, and that will lock in the 2026 cost for you. Right? The other option is before you begin each program, you purchase the number, or each unit, you purchase the number of credits that you require. So once you finish general principles, your next unit is cardiovascular. It's 12 credits. So you would purchase 12 credits before you start cardiovascular. The other option is to enter a monthly plan. And so you pay on the first of every month a proportion of your 12-monthly fee. So we have a plan for you for 12 months and what that's going to cost, and then we divide it by the number of months remaining in the year, depending on when you enter the plan. Now, you can enter a monthly plan at any time. Okay, and the computer and the SIS system will very cleverly calculate exactly what the monthly cost should be. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay. All right, can we click these out a little bit? I know there's been some questions on this. Okay, so the first additional cost, so the actual cost of attending the clinical transition in-person week used to be a fee that was charged to students on their account. That's been incorporated into the credit point cost. But what you need to be aware of is that in-person workshop, if you're in Australia, it's likely to be in Brisbane. And so if you're in Perth or Melbourne, you've got to get to Brisbane, you've got to accommodate yourself, you've got to feed yourself outside your home location. So they're all additional costs that are not included in the tuition. Okay, the same thing with clinical placements, right? Within your home country, you may still have to travel to access a hospital rotation. Okay, so there is highly likely to be some kind of weekly hospital fee. If you are not able to attend that hospital from your home, you may need to travel to a new location and you may need some kind of accommodation. Okay, we have a lot of students in Australia going to the North Adelaide Local Health Network, and those students have to get accommodation. Now, it's an extraordinary clinical rotation location, and all the students who manage to find the way to do it tell me how fantastic their experience has been. And because there are so many students from all over Australia, from all the different universities, there's quite a bit of accommodation that's targeted this group. So there is accommodation available, but it comes at a cost. Okay, the next one. Okay, Samoa. You must do a minimum of 4 weeks on the ground in Samoa. Students routinely tell me this was the best 4 weeks of their program. Okay, it is a life-changing experience for them. What it will cost you, you have to fly there. We have connections which are made available to you for accommodation. The cost of living in Samoa is very, very low. Okay. There is a small rotation fee in Samoa, and there is a small visa cost in Samoa. The latter two are, I know every cent counts, but they're quite reasonable. The expense is really the travel, because my understanding is the accommodation is also quite reasonable and certainly cheaper than you would get in Australia. And all the students tend to stay together, and I think that works really, really nicely for them as a support network for each other as well. Okay, now someone has said, is there an extra cost to the monthly payment plan? The monthly payment plan has an admin fee associated with it. So once again, if you want to avoid any additional fees, you pay as you go, right? The monthly payment plan does have an admin fee associated with it. I think off the top of my head, it's 2%. I did have a look at it yesterday, but my brain's not functioning overly well at the moment. Okie doke, let's have a look at the next slide. OSCE in person. That's the other expense that I'd overlooked. So the OSCE in-person final practical exam, I'm pretty sure in America we traveled to Kansas. Is that right, Dr. Maguire?
Yes.
And in Australia,
Yes.
again, it's in Brisbane. So once again, it's one day, so you need to be there the night before. Lots of students fly out immediately after their exam. So it's up to you how you organise that. But once again, there is travel and accommodation associated with attending that exam. Okay, next slide. All right, so now this is about you. If you join us in July this year, this is what you will have to pay. Before the 1st of June, after you have completed your interview and been offered a place in the university, you will need to pay your intake fee. Now, your intake fee will cover Unit 1 General Principles and 2 research credits. Okay, so it's not lost money, but it is money upfront to pay for your first unit and 2 research credits. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so I skipped through that first one because I knew there was this one coming immediately after. So there's the same information there with your intake fee. And then you will see you've got cardiovascular with a due date of the 31st of August and 2 more research credits by the 31st of December. Now, the due date for that cardiovascular is 7 days before the cardiovascular program starts. Your course, if you are fully paid up, becomes available to you in the week before the program starts. So to give yourself the very best opportunity of success in the program, you need to make sure you're paid up to date so that you get these, you get everything as soon as you possibly can. Okay, and down the bottom line there is by the 31st of December 2026, this is the minimum amount you will need to have paid to successfully complete the first 6 months of the program. Okay, let's go again. Right, so this is the question that doesn't have an answer. Okay, how much will my MD program cost? If I got $1 for every email I received that asked me that question, I'd probably be able to retire. So there are unknowns that make it impossible for us to answer. So what I can recommend to you is that you develop your own Excel spreadsheet. I've given you all the formulas, all the key numbers, and you will get this You will get this PowerPoint presentation made available to you. You will need to decide, what do you think the CPI is going to be in your local jurisdiction for the next, every year, year on year? How long is a piece of string? Okay, so that is the difficulty. Once again, hospital rotations, the costs vary widely. If you're in America at the moment, the costs are $400 a week. Okay, so just to give you an indication, the American costs are much more stable than the Australian costs. The Australian costs vary from anywhere from $100 to $400 a week in 2026. Okay, in Australia, we do still have some free placements, but they are becoming fewer and far between. Okay, so let's have a look at what that looks like for an Australian student in 2026. Let's have a look at the next slide, please, Dr. Maguire. Okay, all right. So I've got no faith in the future of the economy, so I've allocated us at 5% CPI a year. So these costs here are the current year costs in Australia. And I've estimated that in 2020, what year is it? 2029, when you're going to start clinical rotations, it's going to cost you $500 a week. I would hope that's not the case. I would hope that you will be able to, on average, get it cheaper than that. But this is a worst case scenario. And then it just all multiplies out. You saw the formula, and then you come up with it. This is your tuition, and that's your clinical credit cost, your clinical rotation cost on top of that. That is an example only, right? But it's to show you how you could calculate out. You can play with some different clinical rotations. You can play with a different hospital rotation fee. And you can, if you're not in Australia, you can substitute whatever the clinical rotation cost is for your jurisdiction. Okay, so someone's just asked, what's the total tuition for 5 years USMLE pathway? You need to get an Excel spreadsheet and do this and work that answer out yourself. Right? We can't give you that answer because we don't know what the CPI is going to be. In the next webinar, I will give you a price for each jurisdiction if you buy all of your credits in 2026. I also understand that's a highly unrealistic situation for most people. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide. Okay, so this is what the view you will be seeing of the student information system at the moment. It's not a very good screen, but if you've started your process, you will have entered your details, you'll have added your academic details, you've entered, I can't see what the next one is, your employers, uploaded your listed your reference, and then on the uploads, you'll have uploaded all the documents they've asked for. The other thing you need to do is pay your admission fee, right? And so you can do that by clicking on the link, and it will take you to our payment gateway where you can pay either via direct debit or by credit card. Okay, there's some FAQs there as well. If you haven't come across this yet, go and have a look. Right, someone's asked a question, on average, what is the CPI per annum? The CPI is published by the government in each jurisdiction that we work in. You are able to go onto the statistics website of whatever country you're in and see what the CPI was for your jurisdiction. We use the June 12 months to June annual CPI figure every year. And we, at no point have we been required to move away from CPI. So we have been applying CPI since 2023. Okay, so every CPI is linked to your country. That's why the fees are all over the place, and it makes my spreadsheets a nightmare to work with. Okay, but that is fair. It's not fair to apply American CPI to Canada. So have some sympathy for me. I have to try and work all of that out. But we do use the local CPI in your jurisdiction, and that's why the fees are so varied. Because you've got foreign currency calculation, you've got a CPI calculation that varies. So Michael, in answer to your question, it varies dramatically. I don't know what country you're in, but if you're in Australia, you'll be hearing it on the news quite regularly because it's a number that is used politically quite a bit.
Miss Susie, is there somewhere like is there a source that would publish like each country's CPI or international, so like that people could go to if they were interested in learning a
I
bit
go
more
to
information about it?
Yeah, each country's government has a statistics department that publishes the CPI. So if you go on Google, it will take you to the government department that publishes, and there is an enormous amount of data there. So you're looking for the CPI, and they'll have it for the month, they'll have it for the quarter, and they'll have it for the preceding 12 months. So,
Yeah, so just in case students want to look at, or
yeah,
prospective students want to look at historical data just to get an idea to run some numbers for themselves. Thank
yeah.
you for that.
And it does vary from year to year. Okay, there's a question about residency matching rate in the USA. I don't know the answer to that. That's outside of my jurisdiction, I'm sorry. But I'm sure in another webinar with a different audience, different presenters, there will be answers to that question. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I'm conscious I'm close to the end. Oh, we're very close to the end. Okay, so what's next? Go and do that budget. Is this for you? Do you have the financial means to not destroy yourself and your family to get through this program? Right? That's a really, really important question. You have to look after yourself, right? And if you have responsibility for others, you have to look after them as well. Okay, so that's a financial. It's also an emotional commitment. So please reflect long and hard. Do a budget. Share your budget with someone. For many people, going to med school is an emotional decision. And so sharing your budget with someone for a sense check is a very, very good idea. Okay, now the Australian government publishes a budget tool called at moneysmart.gov.au. You can put in your currency. It has within it every possible thing that you could be spending money on. It's very good. I have recommended it outside of this role. I've recommended it to my young adult children. It is an enormously valuable tool. You can download it, you put all the information in and download it, and you actually walk away with a spreadsheet with it all in. So then you can come back and look at it and go, okay, well, that wasn't right, and you can tweak it and it will automatically update for you. So I recommend that tool. Very good for you. Make a financially informed decision. And I think there's one last slide. Okay, so the next time you see me, you will have been offered a place at the university. And when we reconvene next time, we'll talk about how the nuts and bolts of how you pay. So how to use the SIS system, all of the payment options in much more detail. And yeah, so it'll be a very, very practical, functional webinar workshop for you. Okay, so I'm finished. I'm going to quickly scan down the questions and see if there's any questions I can answer. Okay, someone's asked, will you be applying for federal loan in the near future? If not, what private lenders do you recommend? We do not recommend any private lenders. We have reviewed and looked at the possibility of federal study loans. We do not meet the eligibilities because we are an international university. We're not based in the US. And we certainly are not in the business of recommending any loan providers. I can't talk about the lender I mentioned for Australian students. That would imply that I in some way recommend them, which I don't. So you'll need to do your own research. And I would say if you're looking at that and you've got some documents from them, ask to have a chat with me and we'll walk through those documents and I'll make you aware of a few things that may not have been overtly clear to you with the documentation they provided you.
I think the main thing is to always be aware of what you are, of your financial commitments. So whether that's your financial commitment to a university or your financial commitments to your family or your financial commitments to a lender, you have to make sure that you give yourself adequate time to read those documents and fully understand them. And one of the things we talk a lot about at the university is a support system. That you should have people in your support system that you can rely on for various different types of support and activities, and maybe having a really financially savvy friend or someone that you can talk about your budget with, or people that can answer those types of questions are an appropriate person to add to your support system while you're considering going to medical school and while you're making your decisions about the future of your schooling and of your work. So we really encourage you to have a support system that covers all the bases, academics and environment and mental and social health and support and financial as well. So make sure part of this webinar and part of Ms. Susie's job is to be to answer your questions, but we also want to ensure that your support system includes everyone that you may need. So we're just at the end of our time together today. Ms. Susie and I want to thank you so much for joining us here live, or if you joined us via recording, really nice to see you as well. You're more than welcome if you have specific questions for us, you can reach out to us directly. But if you have general questions about the university or about things that apply to your specific situation, always the best person to initially get in contact with is your admissions counselor, because they have all the answers about everything that goes on at the university. And if they don't, they have the ability to get those answers quite quickly from another faculty or staff member, or get you in touch with them directly. And there were a couple individuals that were interested about, talking to a student or what students' experience were. Our admissions counselors can get you in touch directly with one of our OUM student ambassadors if you'd like to talk further with a student. And I also want to encourage you to join us at our webinar next month, where we'll be talking directly with our student ambassadors. So feel free to register for that webinar. And you're also welcome to submit your questions in advance, and we'll ask those live at our next session. So thank you so much, Ms. Susie, for joining us today. We hope you feel better. And thank you so much for lending us your time and voice and expertise today. We really appreciate it. And to all of you, thanks so much for joining us in the OUM community today. We look forward to seeing you again soon at our next webinar and hopefully as part of our OUM community as soon as July of this year. Thanks so much and bye for now.